Hey, tonight we're stepping back into one of the most unforgiving and frankly miserable chapters in human history, not the castles, knights, and courtly romance that Hollywood loves to glamorize, but the brutal, filth-ridden life of a medieval peasant. You might think you could handle it, that a simpler life sounds peaceful or noble, but the truth? It was unrelenting, exhausting, and absolutely dehumanizing. If you're enjoying these gritty trips into the past, a quick like or a subscribe would really help the channel. I'm always curious where you all are tuning in from, so go ahead, drop a comment with your location and the time you're watching or listening. It's always amazing to see how many of us are connecting from all corners of the world to fall asleep to some deeply unromantic, boring old history. Now turn down the lights, maybe throw on a fan or let the crickets outside do their thing. And let's drift into tonight's quiet little nightmare of history together. Welcome to the 14th century. Congratulations, you've just woken up as a peasant in feudal Europe. The good news? You're technically alive. The bad news? That's probably the only good news you'll get today. The first sensation that hits you is the cold. Not a brisk, fresh morning chill, but a deep, penetrating dampness that seems to live in your bones. Your body aches. You're lying on a lumpy straw mattress, likely riddled with fleas, and the thin wool blanket covering you smells vaguely of mildew, smoke, and livestock. You've slept in your clothes because you don't own anything else. Maybe you have a tunic, if you're lucky, and it hasn't been washed in months. Not because you're lazy, but because washing anything in winter is a logistical nightmare involving freezing water, hours of beating fabric against rocks, and then hoping it dries before it molds. Your little hut, calling it a house, would be generusis, made of wattle and daub, basically a framework of sticks stuffed with mud and animal dung. There's a hole in the roof, patched haphazardly with thatch, and it leaks when it rains, which is often. The one-room space is shared with your entire family, maybe 5, 6, or even more people, and probably a goat or a few chickens too. They stay indoors not out of sentiment, but because livestock is valuable and wolves don't knock before they help themselves. The air smells heavily of smoke from the small fire in the center of the room, which chokes the space because there's no chimney. The smoke just drifts upward and out through the same hole that lets in the rain. You cough frequently, your lungs always raw. And yes, this is how many peasants developed chronic respiratory issues or died early from what we'd now recognize as lung infections. Now, it's time to work, always. You are, after all, a serf, which is just a polite word for a legally bound laborer. You don't own your land. It belongs to the local lord, who lets you live on it in exchange for the privilege of working it constantly, and giving him a portion of everything you grow, every egg you collect, and every bit of meat you raise. The first task of the morning? Probably gathering water. There is no well in your hut, of course, and certainly no indoor plumbing. You walk a mile or two to the stream with a wooden bucket, hoping the water isn't too frozen or filled with dead fish or worse. Once you get back, you'll help your spouse prepare a pitiful breakfast. Maybe some porridge made from oats, if there's any left. Bread? Sure, if you still have flour and it hasn't molded. Butter, eggs, or anything remotely luxurious? Only if you didn't have to give those to the Lord last week. You eat quickly. Work begins at sunrise, and you'll be in the fields all day digging, weeding, hauling, plowing, depending on the season. There are no weekends, no holidays, except religious feast days, and even then, the priest might expect extra work. The church, by the way, looms over your life like a second landlord. You tithe 10% of what little you produce, even if your family is starving. And if you question it, that's heresy. You'd better pray, literally, that you don't draw attention. Your hands are already rough and cracked from constant work. There are no gloves. Your fingers are stiff, your nails caked with soil, and your palms thick with calluses and small cuts that fester easily in the absence of soap or any kind of antiseptic. You trudge to the field with a wooden hoe or spade tools so crude and heavy that they feel more like punishment devices than actual implements of labor. You bend over for hours, pulling weeds or turning the soil, your back groaning in protest. There's no medical care for your inevitable aches or injuries. If your back goes out, if you slice your foot open, or break your wrist tripping over a stone, you still work. Or someone else in your family has to pick up the slack, which means someone else goes without rest, increasing the risk that they'll fall ill or collapse too. By mid-morning, you're sweating under layers of rough, scratchy wool. There's no breathable fabric, no moisture-wicking anything. Just hot, scratchy layers and a bonnet or cowl to protect your neck from sunburn. The sun isn't your friend. It scorches the fields, bakes the mud into concrete, and leaves your skin raw. If you're not lucky, you might get sunstroke, especially in summer. And if you faint, no one carries you home, you crawl. Lunch doesn't bring relief. It's often a piece of stale rye bread, maybe with some old cheese if you're lucky, and sometimes a thin broth made from root vegetables. Meat is rare. Chickens are too valuable alive. And pigs or cattle are luxuries reserved for nobles or special feast days. You might sneak an egg here and there, if you're careful not to let the steward catch on. And speaking of stewards, these are the men appointed by the Lord to oversee his land. They're not noble themselves, but they wield enormous power over you. They track your debts, enforce quotas, and ensure you pay your taxes. And they're not gentle about it. If you owe grain, wool, or eggs and can't pay, expect to be fined. If you complain or resist, they have the authority to beat you, imprison you, or worse. The Lord himself you rarely see. He lives in a stone manor house or castle up the hill, far from the stink of his tenants. His meals are lavish. He eats off pewter or silver plates, while you might not even own a wooden one. His hall is warm, filled with laughter and song. Your hut is cold and quiet, except for the sounds of children coughing or mice scratching at the walls. After lunch, it's more work. Always more work. If it's harvest season, you work until the sun dips below the horizon, hacking at grain stalks with a scythe, bundling sheaves, and dragging them to be threshed. If it's spring, you're digging irrigation ditches or planting seeds by hand, one by one. Autumn might bring animal slaughter and salting meat if you have any livestock to kill. Winter is no break either. You patch roofs, fix fences, mend tools, or haul wood. And there's always spinning wool, making candles, brewing ale, tending to the animals, or preparing next season's seed stores. As evening approaches, you're bone tired. You stumble home as the sky dims. Your feet are numb and blistered. Maybe you wash them in a basin of cold water if there's water left. Dinner is just like breakfast, more porridge, maybe a few boiled turnips. If you're lucky, someone managed to catch a rabbit or a handful of eels. They're bony and tough, but food is food. The fire is low. Wood is precious. The smoke stings your eyes as you sit on a wooden stool or the dirt floor and try not to nod off before eating. If you have children, they huddle close, their thin bodies wrapped in whatever rags you could find. They don't complain. They learned early not to. There's no bedtime story, no warm bath, no brushing teeth or lullabies. Just silence and sleep. Maybe a whispered prayer that no one dies of cold or sickness during the night. Your body collapses into the straw. You close your eyes. Another day survived. Another to come. You're jolted awake before sunrise by the coughing of one of your children, their breath raspy and shallow in the freezing morning air. The fire went out hours ago, and the chill bites into your bones. There are no blankets thick enough to keep the cold out, only patched up wool and straw-stuffed tunics layered in desperation. You reach for a pot of water to warm up something, but it's frozen solid. No insulation means your house turns into an icebox in winter and a furnace in summer. You shiver as you force yourself upright, joints creaking like old cartwheels, muscles stiff and sore from yesterday's labor. Your fingers are so cold, they barely respond. As you try to lace your worn boots, the leather stiff and cracked from years of use. Outside, the world is still cloaked in darkness, but there's no time to wait for the sun. Chickens need feeding, goats need milking. If you're lucky enough to have a cow, she'll be bawling impatiently, her breath steaming in the frosty air. You stumble through frozen mud toward the tiny lean-to where your livestock are kept. The smell of manure is overpowering, but to you, it's normal. You gather eggs, careful not to crack them in the freezing air. Each one is precious. Each one means a meal or a few coins at the market if you can spare it. Back inside, your partner is already kneading dough with numb hands. It's made from coarsely ground barley, not wheat. Wheat is too expensive. You eat what's available, and what's available is bitter, hard, and rough on the stomach. Still, it's food. The day's tasks pile up quickly. Today, you've been ordered to help repair a collapsed bridge several miles from your village. It's not your land. It's the Lord's. But it doesn't matter. When you live as a peasant, your time doesn't belong to you. The corvée forced labor for your overlord is just part of the deal. You strap on your sack, grab your tools, and set off on foot, teeth chattering in the morning mist. The roads are treacherous. Just muddy tracks filled with holes, slick with ice, and lined with jagged stones. There's no such thing as proper shoes. Just leather wraps or wooden clogs that pinch and offer no protection. If you slip and twist your ankle, tough luck. No one's carrying you. You arrive at the work site, a narrow stream crossed by a crumbling wooden span. Dozens of other peasants are already there, stooped over, hauling beams, digging ditches, chopping logs. The steward barks orders from the top of a horse, warm and dry in a thick fur-lined cloak. You catch a bitter look from an old man whose hands tremble as he hammers pegs into icy ground. He's probably over 60. That's ancient for a peasant. Most of your friends have died before 40. Disease, starvation, accidents take your pick. There's no clean water, no soap, no doctors. A cough can become pneumonia. A cut can turn into a deadly infection. A rotten tooth? That can kill you. You remember when your cousin died from a fever that started after a scratch from a hayfork. One moment he was strong and laughing, the next he was delirious, burning with heat, and gone by morning. There's no funeral. Just a few words, a hole in the ground, and back to work. At midday, there's a short break. You chew on cold bread and sip thin ale. It's safer than the water, which is often full of waste. You stare out at the gray countryside and wonder if life will always be like this. You've heard stories from passing monks or merchants' tales of far-off lands, cities with stone roads, and food markets brimming with exotic goods. But those are fantasies. Here, in the heart of the feudal countryside, your world is small, and it's hard. After the bridge work is done, you're sent home with no thanks. The steward warns that next week, you'll be expected to dig trenches around the Lord's vineyard. You grit your teeth and nod. Saying no isn't an option. The last man who refused was tied to a post and beaten until he collapsed. You pass his house on the way home. It's been empty since. No one knows where he went, or if he's still alive. The wind picks up as you walk, slicing through your tunic and raising goosebumps on your arms. Your feet are soaked. You think about the warmth of your fire, but then remember there's no wood left. You'll need to gather more tonight, and you're already exhausted. You make it home as the sky turns a dull orange, casting long shadows across the muddy village paths. Your hut stands where you left it, lopsided, drafty, and smudged with smoke, but at least it's still standing. Some neighbors weren't so lucky last storm. Their roofs collapsed under the weight of heavy rain and wind, and now they're huddled with relatives, waiting for the Lord to give permission and wood to rebuild. Inside, the air is heavy with smoke and stale sweat. You cough as you duck under the low beam, careful not to hit your head again. One of your children is crying in the corner, face flushed, breathing labored. Your partner has done what they can. Wet cloths on the forehead, a few dried herbs steeped in hot water, whispered prayers. But there's no medicine, no doctor, just hope and time. You sigh and crouch beside the fire pit. You take a flint and try sparking it into the kindling, blowing gently even as your fingers tremble from the cold. After several tries, it catches. The weak flames offer little warmth, but it's something. Dinner is already in the pot of stew made from cabbage, onions, and a single bone left over from last week's feast day. It smells sour, but your stomach growls anyway. Hunger's your constant companion. There's never enough. You remember last winter when you were so hungry you chewed on tree bark. Some villagers ate rats. Others didn't make it at all. There was a family near the edge of the woods, they simply disappeared. Rumor has it they tried to migrate south, looking for work or shelter, but no one ever heard from them again. You pass the stew around in wooden bowls, each child getting a small portion. You make sure to eat last and least. Parents don't eat first, not when there are mouths to feed. The silence around the fire is broken only by coughing and the scraping of spoons against wood. You try to offer a smile, some warmth, but it feels heavy, forced. Afterward, it's straight to chores again. You take a torch and head out to gather kindling before darkness swallows the world. The woods are only a short walk, but danger always lurks there. Bandits, wolves, or worse, soldiers. Once, when you were younger, a group of mercenaries passed through your village. They demanded food, ale, and entertainment. No one could stop them. The priest tried to protest and was beaten until his jaw shattered. That night, you hid in a root cellar with your siblings while your mother sat upstairs, still and silent, hoping no one would knock on the door. You return from the woods as night falls. The village is quiet now. Just flickers of candlelight from a few windows and the distant bleating of sheep. You pass the communal well, where the water is dark and murky. Some say it's cursed, others say it's just filth. Either way, you don't drink from it unless you have no choice. Back inside, the children are asleep, curled together under the thinnest blanket. You slip off your boots and try to rest, but your mind races. Tomorrow is planting day. The Lord expects your parcel of land to be turned and sown, even if the ground is still partly frozen. If you don't meet the quota, he'll take your oxen, or your land, or worse. The last man who didn't pay his grain tax had his daughter taken into service at the manor. She never came back. You close your eyes, trying to shut out the cold, the fear, the exhaustion. You think of nothing, just darkness. Maybe, if you're lucky, you'll get a few hours of sleep before the rooster crows, and it starts all over again. Being a peasant in the Middle Ages isn't just hard, it's endless. Your life is not your own. It belongs to your lord, your labor, the land, and the rules of a world where birth decides everything. You were born with dirt beneath your nails and you'll likely die that way, unmarked, unremembered, and utterly replaceable. The rooster's crow tears through the silence before dawn, dragging you out of a restless sleep. You rise slowly, your limbs aching as though you had been beaten in your sleep, which in a way you were by straw mats too thin to cushion your bones, by the cold that seeped in through every crack in the hut, and by the relentless ache of hunger gnawing at your insides. You stretch, careful not to wake the children, and quietly step outside. The air is thick with mist, and the ground squelches beneath your feet, still soaked from last night's rain. You make your way to the edge of the field where your crude wooden plow and tired oxen wait. The ox snorts and shifts uncomfortably as you yoke it to the plow. The beast is nearly as worn out as you are. Once proud and strong, it now moves with the slow resignation of an animal that knows only toil and punishment. As the first light of morning breaks over the distant hills, you begin your work. The soil is stubborn, clumped and laced with stones, but you press on. Behind you, the furrows form uneven lines. This is no fertile valley, just grudging land barely willing to give. Hours pass. Your back bends. Your hands blister. You move with mechanical rhythm. Dig, turn, lift, repeat. Around midday, your partner arrives with a small cloth bundlesome stale bread, a lump of hard cheese, and a few sips of watered ale. You eat it slowly, chewing longer than necessary just to stretch the moment. Lunch is not rest. It is simply a pause before more labor. You barely speak, both too tired and too aware of the list of chores waiting back home. After the fields, there are repairs to make your roof leaks again, and your tools are splintering with use. You'll need to barter with the blacksmith for new ones, assuming you can offer anything he finds worthwhile. Once the planting is done, you haul water from the well, an endless, shoulder-straining task made worse by the cold. The bucket's rope burns your palms, and the water sloshes out with every step back to the hut. You use it to wash the dirt from your face and fill the cooking pot again. Your partner tends to the animals, chickens clucking irritably, goats bleating for grain you barely have. You both know they won't last the season if it's a bad harvest. You think of the manor towering in the distance. The Lord's house sits on higher ground, all stone and banners and smoke curling gently from the chimney. Inside, his hearth is warm. His food is fresh. His boots are made of fine leather, and he has never known the sting of frostbite on bare toes. You've seen him ride past on a white horse, face hidden beneath a polished helmet, armor gleaming like a relic from heaven. His knights trail behind, clad in chainmail, laughing, well-fed. To him you are nothing, just a speck among the thousands who owe him their obedience, their crops, their loyalty. You remember the last tax collection day how the bailiff came with 2 guards. Both armored, both sour-faced, and ready for trouble. You had to hand over nearly half your stored grain, plus some chickens. It left your family on the edge of starvation. You tried to protest gently, but were met with a hard backhand that sent you into the mud. You bled from the lip for a week. No one spoke of it. No one dared. Resistance is a luxury for the powerful. For you, survival is the only cause worth fighting for. Evening returns and the wind picks up. The temperature drops swiftly, biting into your skin through threadbare fabric. You huddle in the hut, rocking the baby to sleep while your oldest child picks lice from their scalp with a comb carved from bone. Outside, wolves howl in the distance. You pray they don't come closer. You've lost chickens before. Once, a child. It was years ago, but the memory remains, tucked away with all the other unspoken sorrows of peasant life. As you lie down for the night, you think, maybe tomorrow will be better. Maybe the rain will hold off. Maybe the ox won't die. Maybe the Lord will forget your hut when he calls for another levy of men to fight his wars. You know better than to hope too much. In this world, misery isn't a season, it's a way of life. The night is quiet, but not peaceful. Every creak of the wooden beams above your head makes you wonder if the roof will finally cave in this winter. Wind whistles through gaps in the wall where the mud has crumbled away. You wrap a threadbare wool blanket tighter around yourself, listening to the low, shallow breathing of your family curled beside you. The fire has gone out, and with no more wood to burn until morning, the cold gnaws at your bones like a hungry dog. You try to sleep, but your mind races not with dreams, but with lists. Tasks you didn't finish today, things you'll have to fix tomorrow, what you can trade at the next market, and what you'll need to lie about just to make it through. The rooster crows again far too early, and your second day begins before the first ever truly ended. There's no time to eat. Breakfast is a luxury for someone who isn't already behind on the day. Instead, you start by mending the hole in your child's only tunic, patching it with scraps of old fabric too weak to survive another wash. Your partner has taken the ox again, back to the field, while you stay behind to spin wool, check traps, collect kindling, and gather anything remotely edible from the meager herb patch. You glance toward the church bell, its solemn toll echoing across the village to signal the start of Mass. You're supposed to go. Everyone is. But not going means fines. Going means lost time. Either way, you lose something. The priest talks about divine will, about the righteous path and salvation for the obedient. You try to listen, nodding when appropriate, but your stomach grumbles so loud it's hard to think. The church is drafty and cold, stone walls echoing with every cough, every muttered prayer, every child's cry. You're surrounded by other peasants, all equally worn down, equally defeated by the unchanging cycle of dirt, sweat, and silence. Outside, the sun is finally shining, but it doesn't offer warmth, just a pale, watery light that makes everything look older. You walk to the communal oven with your neighbors to bake what little dough you manage to make. The baker, gruff and old, reminds you to leave your portion of the tithe for the manor. Bread is life, but it is also currency. Too little, and you'll owe. Too much, and they'll suspect hoarding. You walk back to your hovel slowly, passing the well where a few children throw stones and tease each other with grimy laughter. You think of your own children, born into a world where joy is fleeting and death is never far. You've seen what happens during the hard years. You remember the winter famine that took half the village. The old froze, the newborns wasted, the sick grew sicker, and the healthy grew cruel. You don't speak of those days, but they never leave you. By the afternoon, a small group of knights passes through. They don't even look at you, their attention fixed ahead. One of them flicks his reins, and mud splashes your legs as his horse gallops by. You lower your eyes quickly. Drawing attention is dangerous. You've seen people dragged off before for petty crimes, imagined insults, or just being in the wrong place. The Lord's justice is swift and merciless. Your village once watched a man lose his hand for stealing a sack of oats. His children starved anyway. No one helped them after that. The evening meal is thin pottage with a few roots. It tastes of smoke and ash, and you chew slowly to make it last. Your partner tries to reassure you, says spring will be better, that the miller might take a sack of rye in exchange for flour next week. You nod, but you don't believe it. Not really. You've lived through too many seasons, too many broken promises and failed harvests to hold on to hope easily. Still, when your children finally fall asleep, nestled together in the dim, flickering light of a dying candle, you let yourself whisper a quiet prayer. Not for riches, not even for ease. Just for one day where it doesn't hurt to wake up, where the wind doesn't cut through your skin, where your hands don't ache before dawn. You close your eyes, but the exhaustion is heavier than your body. You don't dream anymore. You just drift into a shallow, guarded sleep, ready to wake at any sound. Tomorrow will come, and you'll survive it too. That's all there is. Surviving, not living. And in the Middle Ages, survival is the closest thing to freedom a peasant can ever hope to know. You wake the next morning to the low clang of the manor bellet's dull, unrelenting tone signals the arrival of the reeve, the Lord's appointed enforcer who's come to inspect the fields. You barely have time to lace your boots before trudging out into the muddy lane, your breath curling into the crisp morning air. The fields are still damp from last night's frost, and your feet sink into the earth with each step. As you walk, you glance over your shoulder at your homa-leaning patchwork of timber and thatch. Its walls bowed with age and weather, its door barely hanging on its hinges. There's no privacy here, no safety. Even inside your home, rats scurry underfoot and the cold seeps through the walls like smoke. Outside, things are worse. The reeve stands tall and sneering, a leather strap coiled in one hand as he counts heads. A few villagers are missing, likely sick, or hiding, but no one dares mention it. He moves down the line, checking each villager's calloused hands and cracked nails, a twisted grin forming when he spots a blister. Lazy? He mutters under his breath. Loud enough to make your stomach tighten. You're assigned to the weeding party today, a group tasked with clearing the manor's barley fields of every stray plant. You know what's coming. Hours on your knees, hunched forward in the wind, with frostbitten fingers trying to separate weeds from shoots. The older villagers groan and limp behind you, while the younger ones press on with quiet resignation. There are no shortcuts. Every missed weed could cost your village a portion of grain, and the manor never misses its due. Around midday, the reeve returns on horseback, kicking dust into your face as he passes. He says nothing, just watches, chewing a reed and smirking like a cat who's caught a bird. You avert your eyes. Speaking without being spoken to is a punishable offense. Even eye contact can be considered disrespectful. After he leaves, you stop for a moment to rub your aching wrists, but an older woman next to you whispers harshly, "Don't stop. He might come back." The afternoon blurs into a painful monotony of wind, cold, and silence. When you finally return to the village, the sky has turned a dull gray and smoke curls lazily from a few cooking fires. You barter a few leftover turnips for a piece of salted fish. It's more bone than meat, but you share it evenly among your family. As you eat, a neighboring child bursts into a coughing fit deep, rattling wet. No one looks up. Sickness is a shadow that hovers in every home. You say nothing, but your throat tightens. Last time sickness came, you buried your sister behind the old church wall with a wooden marker, and nothing more. Her grave, like so many, is already half sunken and forgotten. That night, you lie awake again, staring at the beams of your roof. You count the notches you carved for each passing seasonally marks of survival. The wind howls outside, and you pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders. There's no warmth, only the illusion of it. You wonder what your life might be like if you'd been born a noble, if you'd had a real bed, food in every meal, a fire that never died. But such thoughts are dangerous. Hope is dangerous. So you chase them away and turn your focus to the tasks of tomorrow. Repairing the fence, checking the traps in the forest, sewing another patch onto your son's shoes. Maybe this time it'll hold for a few weeks. You murmur a prayer into the darkness, barely audible even to yourself. You don't know if anyone listens, but the act of whispering comforts you. You fall asleep that way half curled, half frozen, half hoping the next day doesn't bring more of the same. But deep down, you already know it will. The next day begins before the sun rises. You're jolted awake by the sharp clang of a wooden spoon on the rim of a pot outside signal that breakfast is being prepared for the day's laborers. You crawl from under the thin woolen blanket, every joint stiff and sore from the damp cold that clings to your bones. The house smells faintly of smoke and stale grain, and your stomach grumbles at the thought of food. But when you reach the pot, there's only a thin porridge made from yesterday's leftover oat husks and a few turnip shavings. You eat slowly, savoring every bland mouthful, while children scuffle nearby for the last scraps. Hunger has a way of dulling conversation. Everyone moves quietly, focused on the long hours ahead. Today, you've been assigned to gather firewood from the nearby forest, a dangerous task. Not just because of the wild animals, but because the forest technically belongs to the Lord. Peasants caught taking too much or any game can be punished severely. Still, wood is essential. Without it, there's no heat, no cooked food, no means of boiling water to make it safe. So you go. The forest is cold and shadowy, thick with twisted trees and moss-covered stones. You carry a rusted hatchet and a rough sack, accompanied by 2 other villagers. None of you speak. There's something sacred about the silence of the forest, something that reminds you of how small you are. You focus on the task splitting dead branches, binding them into bundles, avoiding the Lord's foresters who patrol the area for poachers. You think you see one just a flash of a green cloak between the trees, but it might have been a bird. You don't wait to find out. By midday, your arms are sore and your back screams with every movement, but you've gathered enough wood to last a few days. On the way home, one of the older men collapses. He's breathing, but just barely, his face pale and sweaty. No one knows what to do. There's no doctor, just the village herb wife, and her cures are mostly hope and prayer. You leave a few sticks behind, so you can help carry the man home. When you arrive, his wife is already weeping. She knows, just like you do, that men who fall in the field often never get back up. Back in the village, a thin, frigid rain begins to fall. You rush to cover the firewood and patch the roof with old thatch and scraps of cloth. The water still leaks in, forming little puddles on the uneven dirt floor of your home. You try to ignore it. There's no dry place to rest, so you sit on an overturned bucket and remove your soaked shoes, watching steam rise from your wet socks. Your hands are raw, the skin cracked open in places. You wash them with cold water from a barrel, biting back a hiss of pain. There's no ointment, just an old rag to wrap them. Dinner is the same porridge as breakfast, maybe a touch saltier. You hear a commotion outside, a small boy shouting. You go to the door and see a group gathered around the church. A messenger has arrived from the next manor over. He brings news of a tax increase. The village must give an additional portion of their grain to the Lord this winter, or risk eviction. There's a long silence. Then, low murmurs. Someone kicks a bucket. Another starts crying. No one yells, because it won't change anything. You walk home in the rain, your thoughts heavy. You remember the secret row of carrots you planted behind the hedge illegal, but maybe it'll help. You pray no one discovers it. That night, you lie in bed, staring at the ceiling again. You wonder if life was ever different, if any peasant ever lived without fear, without hunger, without pain. You've never known anything else. You drift off slowly, your body aching, your breath shallow, your mind already bracing for tomorrow's struggles. You wake before dawn the next morning, your body aching from the previous day's labor, though there's no time to dwell on it. Today, it's your turn to tend to the fields. The earth is heavy with mud after the rain, and the plow, dragged by a half-starved ox, groans with every furrow. You grip the wooden handles so tightly that splinters bite into your palms, but letting go isn't an option. Behind you, children follow, tossing seed into the damp soil, hoping birds won't eat it all before it can take root. The sky stays gray, promising more rain or maybe sleet. Either way, it doesn't matter. The planting must be finished. Around midday, your back screams in protest, but you stop only long enough to gnaw at a hunk of dry barley bread and a lump of cold, greasy lard. There's no water nearby, so you chew slowly, careful not to choke. Then it's back to work. The Lord's reeve passes by on horseback, inspecting the progress. He says nothing, but his eyes sweep over the field, judging, calculating. You don't meet his gaze. To do so might seem insolent. You keep your head low and your hands moving. By late afternoon, your tunic is soaked through with sweat and mud. Your legs cramp with every step. You're numb to the ache by now physical pain is as common as breathing. When the sun finally begins to set, casting a pale orange glow over the treetops, you lead the ox back to the barn. It collapses halfway there, legs folding awkwardly beneath it. You call for help. A few other villagers come, and together you heave until the poor beast stands again, swaying, breathing heavily. There's a general agreement it won't last the winter. No one can afford to replace it. Back home, your wife has managed to make a stew from cabbage and a few tiny scraps of mutton, likely scavenged from a bone the butcher discarded. You eat in silence, both grateful and ashamed grateful for warmth, ashamed that you've grown used to such a pitiful meal. Later, your neighbor stops by. His child has a fever. He asks if you have any willow bark left, your family's only remedy for pain. You hesitate, but hand him the bundle. It's the right thing to do, but your stomach turns as you watch him leave. If your own child falls ill, you'll have nothing left to give. That night, the village gathers in the church for a rare event. A traveling priest has arrived. He speaks of sin, punishment, and eternal damnation, but few are truly listening. They're too tired, too cold. Some come just for the shelter. Afterward, people linger, whispering rumors about another rebellion in the north, or about a neighboring manor that was burned by bandits. No one knows if it's true. It doesn't matter. Nothing changes here. Back at home, your youngest child wakes from a nightmare, crying about wolves. You rock them gently, whispering stories about saints and angels, though you barely believe them yourself. Outside, the wind howls, and in the distance, a wolf answers. You lie awake, staring again at the wooden beams above you, your fingers numb beneath the thin blanket. Another day gone, another one coming. And you wonder, not for the first time, if you'll survive the season. The next morning arrives without rest. Your joints creak as you rise from the straw, your breath misting in the frigid air. The hearth has long since gone cold, and no one dared waste precious firewood during the night. Your eldest daughter is already outside, trying to coax the family's single hen to lay an egg. She returns empty-handed and silent. Breakfast is thin porridge made from oats and water, no milk, no honey. It tastes of ash and effort. But hunger is hunger, and even this is something. The village is quieter than usual. Word has come that the reeve has summoned every able-bodied man for road repair. The path to the Lord's estate has become impassable from rain and foot traffic, and the manor needs a clean route for the coming tax collector. You spend hours hauling stones, digging drainage ditches, and shoring up mud-caked cart paths. One man slips and cracks his ankle on a boulder. The others glance over, grim, and keep working. There's no time, no help, no luxury for injury. When the sun reaches its highest point, a boy from the manor brings a bucket of watery ale and stale bread. It's your only rest. You sit in the grass, gulping the liquid as if it were wine. Flies gather around the crust of your bread, but you wave them off and chew anyway. Afterward, it's back to the trench. The work leaves your hands raw. Your knees sore, your shoulders ablaze. When the reeve finally dismisses you, the sky is already deep purple. You trudge home in silence, mud weighing down your boots like iron. That evening, you find your wife trying to patch a tear in your tunic using thread she unraveled from an old cloth. You thank her softly. She just nods. Your daughter hands you a tiny egg the hen must have laid after all. You all share it, slicing it into 4 careful parts. The yolk is rich, the taste almost heavenly. As night settles in, there's talk of the neighboring village succumbing to sickness. A traveling merchant may have brought that was coughing when he passed through, one man says. Another adds that the priest mentioned divine punishment for idle thoughts. You all murmur your prayers. Still, you can't help but wonder how much sin truly lives in your heart. You sleep uneasily, dreams twisted with images of boils and ash. When you wake, the fever has already taken one child in the village. A bell tolls slowly from the church tower, each chime heavy as a funeral stone. You wrap your own children tighter that night, holding them close to your chest as if your warmth alone can protect them. But there's little time to grieve. The very next morning, the reeve returns with a new list of tasks: harvesting rushes from the riverbank for thatching, digging new irrigation trenches, mending the manor's fencing. None of it benefits you directly. Still, refusal isn't an option. You grab your tools and walk, legs stiff and heavy. At the river, you cut your hands on sharp reeds, shiver waist-deep in freezing water, and pray silently that your children won't catch the fever. You see the other villagers' faces gray with fatigue, hands cracked and blistered, expressions blank. This is not life as you know it today. This is endurance. This is obedience. This is a system where every moment of your life is accounted for, taxed, weighed, and barely sustained. When you return home, your wife tells you another villager has fallen sick. This time, it's the baker's boy. He's only 6. The fever is moving fast. You boil every scrap of linen you have, hang it to dry, and pray that it will do some good. That night, your youngest coughs in her sleep. You don't sleep at all. The cough grows worse by morning. You sit by your daughter's side, your rough hands trembling as you touch her forehead. She's burning up. There's no doctor, of course. The village priest offers a prayer and a mixture of herbs wrapped in cloth. You nod, grateful, but inside, you know it's likely useless. Still, you soak the cloth in water and press it to her skin. Your wife has gone pale, eyes locked on the floor. No one speaks much. Oh, Tside, life goes on. The other villagers trudge to the fields, scythes over their shoulders. The reeve won't delay labor for personal tragedy, even when it strikes a child. You take turns with your wife tending to the other children, trying to keep them apart from their sister. That night, your sick child's eyes roll back, and she starts muttering nonsenses, saints and angels, and the sound of wind in the trees. She doesn't wake again. The burial is quick. The priest recites a passage in Latin that you don't understand, but you bow your head anyway. The earth is hard. It takes nearly an hour to dig the grave. There is no marker, only a small wooden cross carved from a fence post. You don't cry not openly. Grief must wait. There's still food to grow, fences to mend, and winter is only weeks away. The village slowly returns to normal, except nothing is normal. You watch your other children more closely now. Every cough is a threat. Every chill could be the start of something worse. You work harder, as if physical exhaustion could keep death at bay. Your hands blister, your back feels like it's splitting in two. Yet you go on. Everyone does. In the fields, rumors begin again this time, of wolves in the forest and bandits on the road. The priest claims the sickness is gone, but no one believes him. You start noticing fewer people at Mass. Some are still ill, others are afraid. The manor steward visits once, reminding everyone that harvest ties are still due. Even if illness has taken your strongest hands, you nod, give a bow, and feel the weight of injustice sit heavier than ever. But what can you do? The Lord lives in a stone manor behind thick walls and iron gates. He doesn't know your name. He doesn't care to. The world turns, and you keep digging, planting, hauling, bowing. You were born to it. You know no other way. One evening, As frost begins to claim the edges of the fields, you hear a strange sound hooves in the distance, torches bobbing along the road. You tense. Is it bandits? Taxmen? Raiders? No one knows. The villagers gather in the square, armed with pitchforks and scythes. But it's only messengers from the bishop demanding a special tithe this year. Something about repairs to the cathedral. No one argues. You pool your meager earnings. A few eggs, a small sack of barley. It's all taken without a word of thanks. That night, your wife sews by firelight, mending old garments with threads salvaged from unraveling others. You watch her silently, grateful and heartbroken all at once. You wonder how much longer she can keep going, how much longer any of you can. Your son, barely 8, already has blisters from helping in the field. You want to stop him, let him rest. But you also need the help. Survival doesn't wait for childhood. It doesn't wait for rest or grief or fairness. It just demands, constantly. And you give until there's nothing left.